All right, so now we're talking the three things that we are training for. We train for strength, we train for endurance, we train for power. Okay, so strength is just rough definitions here. What this is the ability to overcome inertia. And that's not the definition that most people use for strength. But really, what it means is that you're able to take something that's standing still and get it going. So I'm going to take a weight and I'm going to move a weight. Or I can take a bike that's standing still and I can really power that through and get it up to a really high speed in a short period of time. Or I can jump as far as I can. So all of those things are strength type movements that are going to be important for basically you have to take something, an object that's at rest, and you have to change it into something that's moving very quickly, or you have to take it, an object that's moving, and you have to slow it down really quickly. That's where you need strength. Endurance is the ability to maintain force, power, or speed. So if you're Usain Bolt and you can run faster than any other person alive today, then that's great. That's your speed. But if you want to be able to do that again and again and again and again, that's where you need endurance. And that's where Usain Bolt has not got as much endurance as somebody who is trained for endurance. And then power. Power is now strength again, but it's strength related to time. And it's how quickly you can develop force. So how quickly can you develop the force that's going to be our maximal strength? So if you're testing a maximal strength, you might be able to get up to a lot of strength or a lot of force that your muscles can produce, but maybe it takes you you can only do it gradually. You're a little bit slow to develop that. If we're looking at performance, you're not going to do very well if you don't have this high power, because most events, you need power. You need to be able to develop force quickly. So it's not enough to be big. You have to be big and you have to be able to develop that strength that you have in the shortest possible time. All right? So when we talk about strength and endurance, we're talking about people like this. Matthias Steiner was the Olympic gold medalist in weightlifting in the heavyweight division. And Yannis Kouros, again, somebody you've never heard of, but he set most of the endurance running records greater than, say, 50 kilometers. So this is an incredible individual. He's set endurance running records for how long it took him to run around Australia. What's the longest you can run in 24 hours? All of these different things, this is the guy that set all those records. Now, if you were to see these guys in person, one would be here, and the other would be here, and this big. So Yannis is tiny, tiny, tiny. Matthias, you see him walking down the street, you'd be like, oh, who's the fat one? Because he does not look like an elite athlete. But man, he is hugely strong and can develop that strength in a short period of time to incredibly explode huge amounts of weight off the ground in a very short period of time. Okay, this is strength. Endurance is, again, being able to go again and again. He's able to run around Australia in a short period of time. If we go back to the ninth lecture that we had, we said we used fat, and we said we used sugar as our primary fuels. And those were things that we used to generate ATP. And ATP is what we're going to use to generate the energy that's going to allow our muscles to contract. It's a little bit more complex than just fat and carbohydrate, because remember we talked about how the carbohydrate, the sugars, could be broken down and make ATP outside of the mitochondria, and they didn't need oxygen. And that's what we called glycolysis, right? So we can generate energy glycolytically, and then when it goes into the mitochondria, we're going to use oxygen to generate energy, or ATP. So we got oxidative and glycolytic energy that we're regenerating ATP quickly. And then I told you that you also have a little bit of stored ATP in your muscles, and you have this thing, phosphocreatine. And phosphocreatine can transfer the phosphate group from phosphocreatine onto ADP to regenerate ATP quickly. But you don't have much stored ATP and you don't have much phosphocreatine. It's enough to last maybe 30 seconds. All right, so if you're going to do an activity that's going to last 30 seconds, most of that energy is going to come from the stored ATP and phosphocreatine within the muscle. If it's going to last, say, up to about 2 minutes, now what you're going to do is you're going to be able to use glycolytic energy. You're going to be able to use sugar, breaking down the sugar using glycolysis to produce ATP very quickly. So you can do that very quickly. You can see that this is how quickly you can make ATP. So how many kilocalories of ATP can you make per minute? From stored ATP and phosphocreatine, you can make really, really fast. When we look at glycolysis, the maximal rate is a little bit, about a third less than the stored ATP and phosphocreatine. But you can make that energy for a longer period of time, up to this 2-minute-ish time period. And then when we talk about getting that energy into the mitochondria, getting those fuel sources into the mitochondria and regenerating ATP using oxygen and creating carbon dioxide, that's this oxidative energy. Remember, I told you it took longer, it was slower than glycolytic. When we quantify that, it's about it's about half the speed. So it's about 1/3 of the rate of stored energy or stored phosphocreatine. So we can generate about 90 kilocalories of energy of ATP from phosphocreatine and stored ATP, about 60 at maximum from glycolysis, and about 30 at maximum from oxidative energy stores. Okay, but you can see that at about 30 seconds, it's really, really hard to go that 400 meters in the men's, about 45 seconds. When you're transitioning from this mostly stored energy to glycolytic energy, that's a really difficult one to do. And then this time period around 2 minutes when we're transitioning from glycolytic to oxidative energy, that's again, it's a really difficult distance to run. But what you can see is if we sum all of these different sources together, we get this line of about how much energy we can produce per minute over time. And you can see it drops around 30 seconds to about 60 seconds. There's that really quick drop, and then it kind of plateaus out as we get towards these longer distances. The interesting thing is if we take a look at the running world records, look at the shape. It looks almost exactly the same. Usain Bolt actually goes faster over 200 meters than he does over 100. That's because the start where he's completely stopped has less of an effect on his time in the 200, because that period to get up to speed, it takes him 20 meters. 20 meters of a 100-meter race is 20% of the race. 20 meters of a 200 is only 10% of the race. So his average speed over the 200 is actually faster than over the 100. But then you get out to 400 meters, now it's starting to drop, and then it is that quick drop. And then you get out to about a minute and a half. Now you're in the 200-meter range. Now you see that plateau, and then it looks exactly the same as the energetics. And that's because we can only go as fast as we can produce energy to power our bodies. If we go faster than we can produce energy, we go into a deficit that we can't maintain very long. And so the reason that our maximal speed looks a lot like that shape of the energetics curve is because the maximal speed we can maintain is how quickly we can produce the energy to let us go.